start the recording, and then we'll get going.
Perfect.
Alrighty, I've got 2 of you here, so this will be a fun tutorial. Can't wait for this to be on the final exam and everyone to say we didn't learn it. Because this, I guarantee, what we will be talking about in today's tutorial will appear in the final exam. 100%. So, let's talk about files, shall we? We all have seen files before. Files have text in them. This is a text file. This is also a text file. I'm going to delete that for now. This is a CSV file. CSV standing for comma separated values. Name, usage, rating, royal assent. They're all separated by a comma, hence comma separated values. Files just contain data. That's all they're really used for. However, as a programmer, we need to be able to use said data. So let's take a look at just 2 quick old questions that will really introduce files. And that should be really quick. So I would say we will open the floor to questions afterwards, but considering I only have 2 students, we'll see how this goes. Oh, now we have 3. Welcome, Sanjana. Alrighty, so starting the entire class, we're going to be looking at a limerick question. The limerick question is designed to work with this limerick.txt supplied to you guys in the meeting chat. And it is 6 lines. I'll just quickly read the limerick since we, again, have time. A program genius called Hank wrote a system to access his bank. When his memory failed him, they nailed him, then jailed him. Now his storage is basic and dank. The entire point of the limerick question is to read the file, then go line by line and append the current line number and a tab. Very similar to how VS Code already does it. See how it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the side? That's basically what we want to do. We should get the exact same string in and out, but with a number and a tab character, and then we write it to a new file. So this is pretty easy in terms of a question. First, we have to identify the parts. Well, part 1 is read the file. Part 2 is make the new content. Part 3 is write new file. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So let's take it part by part. Part 1, how do we read a file in Python? Well, in class, you guys are going to learn the long way. File handler equals, what is it? Open file read, and then you would have all of the data in FH, and when you were done the function, you would call fh.close. So fh opens a file in read permissions, then at the end you call fh.close. I'm going to teach you guys what I think is a better way to do files, however, and for the most part, most people in Python agree, because it automatically closes the file for you, so you have to write less lines of code. And that's with the with command. The with command allows you to basically automatically open and close any data structure. It's not helpful for a lot of things, but it's very helpful for files. So I'm going to open my in file, which is a variable that tells you where the input is. And I'm going to open it with read permissions. If you're wondering what the permissions are, there's read, read write, write, append. We're going to be looking at read. And then I'm going to open that as the variable fh. And if you wonder what fh stands for, it stands for file handler. It's just a common naming convention in Python. You could call this whatever you want. You could call this f. You could call this dairy cow. Whatever you want to call the variable, it does not matter. For consistency, I usually just call it fh. So we've opened the file, into the variable fh. And what we want to do is we want to actually read the file now. We have stated that this is a file. I now need to read every line of the file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some sort of content, like file content variable, to store the file's content. Pretty self-explanatory. So I'm going to go fh.read lines. What read lines does is it will go through line by line. It will read a program Genius called Hank, and it will put that in the file content list. Then it goes to the next line and says, wrote a system to access his bank, and puts that in the file content list, etc., etc. So now we have read the file, and if we want, I can print. Oops, I don't want to print limerick. I want to print file content. And if I were to run this, currently you can see I get a list of all of the lines of my file. Nice, easy, quick, simple. I'm going to take a moment because we now actually have 5 people. If anyone has a question, interrupt me now. Okay, I'm assuming that this isn't scaring you guys yet, because this is pretty easy. Open the file, put it as a variable, read the lines from the file into a new variable, bada bing, bada boom. This variable is our lines of our file. Now we need to edit every line. If we have this string, we need this string, but at the beginning it has to say 1 tab. So let's go ahead and do that. First, I'm going to need to do a for loop for I in range, then file content. And what this is going to let me do is it's going to let me get those line numbers. I is going to be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. I'm going to have to actually do I plus 1 when I'm appending the new string. And I'm also going to make a list called new content. This is where I'm going to save my new strings. So what I'm going to do is the old string, if you want to think about it, was the file content at index I. The new string is going to simply be the old string. However, before, we're just going to append the current line number plus 1. If you guys don't remember, this is a format string. Very similar, Nick taught you guys string dot format, same thing. And then a tab character. Because remember, for loops start at 0, go to n minus 1, which means I need to do I plus 1, so that way it will be the number 1, then a tab, then the line of the program. A number 2, then a tab, then the line from the file, sorry. The number 3, then a tab, then the line from the file. I need it to be 1 higher than what I currently is. So that's why I'm doing I plus 1 here, then a tab, then the old string. So now if I go through and just print the new content list, see I get 1 tab, a program Genius called Hank, new line. 2, wrote a system to access bank, new line. 3, when his memory failed him, new line. 4, they nailed him, then jailed him, new line. 5, now storage is basic and dank, new line. So all we've done is we've just simply iterated over every item and appended new items to it. Taking a moment. If you guys got questions, call me out now.
Why are we doing the plus 1? The bit you've highlighted there, I'm not sure I understand why it looks the way it does.
I could have also done the string version of I+1 plus a tab character plus the old string. Just remember, I+1 is a number. It's not a string. And you can't add a string and a number together. If I were to open a Python terminal and try and do, so, whoops, that's not Python. If I do 1 plus hello there, you get an error. You can't add an integer in a string. So what I had to do is I had to typecast the integer into a string, and doing this is the exact same as doing a format string of I+1, which is in itself the exact same as doing :b dot format I+1.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I did have an entire 20 minutes of a tutorial just dedicated to format strings. So I do recommend if you want to find it, I think it was like literally tutorial 1. It was one of the first tutorials I did that just talked about all of the different ways you can format a string. This is my preference. What you guys are probably more akin to is probably something in the style of string I+1 plus a tab character plus old string. And this is equally as valid. All right, on to the last part of the question. Writing a brand new file. So, writing a brand new file is pretty much the exact same as reading a file, literally to the point where I can actually copy the existing and change specific parts. Part 1, instead of opening in file, I'm going to open my out file. It's a variable, so I don't have to worry about it. Step 2, I change the permission from read to write. I could reuse the variable if I want. It doesn't matter because file handler was closed up here, meaning I can reuse him. And instead of fh.readlines being saved to a variable, I can get rid of this and instead do write lines. New content, throw that in there. So I'm saying file, write lines, new content. Pretty basic. I'm going to run that. And if I open result.txt, bada bing, bada boom. The lines were cleanly written to the file. I could even delete this file so it doesn't exist on my left-hand side, run the code. Python creates the file for me and then populates it. So whenever a write file, this doesn't apply to read files, only to write files. Whenever a write file is being opened, if it doesn't exist, Python will just create it for you. If it does exist, it will overwrite it for you. So if I were to completely blank it out, but I don't delete it, and I run this, it's now populated, but it's just the same file. Read files always need to exist. If the read file doesn't exist, this line here would actually throw an error. If you wanted to account for that error, you could do try blah, 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 and then except, and I don't remember the name of the specific exception. It's like file not found error. Yeah, file not found error. And then what you could do is, let's say there was a question on a test where attempt to open in file. However, if it doesn't have .txt, append .txt. So now if I did this question just as limerick, the file limerick doesn't exist. The file limerick.txt does. So if I were to run this code, you can see it still worked. And that's because this try block failed, and this except block is what happens. If I were to run this code without the try and except, do-do-do and do-do-do, there's my file not found error. Limerick didn't exist as a file. I had to account for Limerick not existing and deal with it appropriately. Does that make sense? This part's pretty important because we almost always throw this on a test. All right. I have put a bonus challenge here. I thought of it last second. I thought it would be fun for you guys. If I have time at the end of class, we'll go through and do it. See how some of these words are have quotation marks? So access, bank, storage, basic. Try changing all of those to the word pineapple. It would be fun. I thought you guys would enjoy it. So that's a fun little bonus challenge. All you have to do is edit this specific part of the function in order to get it working. However, I have to move on to silly words. Silly words uses a new type of file, a file that is specifically formatted with data. This is called a CSV file, a comma-separated value file. Every item is a value and it's separated by commas. Pretty nice, pretty basic. Now, writing a thing that parses this by hand is tedious and useless because Python has already done it. Python will Python's CSV library automatically does string.split by comma, then 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, etc., etc. It would automatically break this list into its subparts for you to use. You could also, if your CSV file has a header line, which this one does, this is your header line, you could make everything into a dictionary. So this would be line 2 at key name. 60 would be line 2 at key usage. 17 would be line 2 at key rating. And the true would be line 2 at key Royal Assent. We are going to use the dictionary one purely because it looks really good. But you guys will have access to Google on a test, and it's your personal preference. If you guys don't want to use the dictionary reader, you don't have to use the dictionary reader. If you guys didn't even want to use CSV, you do not have to use CSV. It's just you are going to have to look into all of the functions you'll need if you choose to do it a different way, which you guys should be able to do. So, silliest word is a question where, again, we're given the CSV file. It has name, usage, rating, and Royal Assent. And the type of name is always a string. The types of usage and rating are always numbers. And Royal Assent is always a Boolean value. And using the information, we have to identify the silliest word using the following criteria. 1, a word can't be funny unless the queen thinks it's funny. So there's the Royal Assent variable right there. Then we calculate a score. What we do is we take multiply the number of times a British comedian has used the word, that's usage. You multiply that by 5, then divide it by the Canadian rating number. Then if it fails, for example, if usage is not a number or rating is not a number, then it has to fail, meaning it can't be the funniest word. And then we just return the one with the highest score. So this question seems like a lot at first. It's not that bad. The way we're going to do it is we're going to create a variable called funniest word, and it's going to be empty. And I'm also going to create a score variable. This is another way you do it in Python, in which is the lowest number you can ever have, negative math.infinity. If you're ever working with something that involves maximums or minimums, I always pick the literal lowest possible number you can get of negative math.infinity. That's just negative infinity. everything is higher than it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the file, and the in file, of course, is my variable in file. I'm going to open it in read permissions, and I'm going to save it to the variable fh for me to use. And like I said, I want to use the CSV reader. So when I do content equals, I'm going to actually ask CSV to create a new dictionary using CSV dict reader, and I'm going to pass in my file. This will automatically go through the file and make a list of dictionaries that contains all of the content. So if I were to do print list content, because a dict reader is actually a custom item, and I do that, you can see name, Sesmetercus, I don't know, usage 60, rating 17, royal ascent true. That's one dictionary. The next dictionary, name, mod revenged, I don't know, usage 38, rating 24, royal ascent true. That's another dictionary, and it's a different line of the file. This happens for every line. So this is just going to make the solution a lot more readable, but it's not required. You could very much just use a CSV reader, or you could do it by hand. Then for every line in my list of content, the reason I'm doing list again is, remember, a CSV dictionary reader is a custom type. All classes are technically custom type, and I just want them to be something I can work with. I could want it to be a list or a tuple or a set. I don't care. I just want it to be something a bit friendlier to work with. So now what I'm doing is I'm going through every line one at a time. So I can pick one specific case and work only with that. So what are the steps? Step 1, a word is not funny unless the queen thinks it's funny. Cool. So I know for a fact if my line, if I get the item at royal ascent, this has to be funny. It has to be the string true. Or I could say that the if bool at line royal ascent, blah, blah, blah. This is an if statement that I can always say. I'm going to not typecast it to bool. I'm going to just say if line at royal ascent equals true. But you guys can do it however you guys think it's appropriate to do it. So if the queen thinks it's funny, that's step 1. If it's not funny, then I can't make it the funniest word. So everything has to happen inside this if statement. Second, we have to calculate the word score. However, if you look at point 3, if the above calculation fails for any reason, it cannot be the funniest word. The fact that it says the above calculation can fail means that this is going to be some sort of try except. And I'm going to do accept exception as E because that's just the way I typically do. The exception is going to be just continue because we just want the loop to keep going. ... So now I need to calculate the words score. There's something that goes here, ... Then what I have to do is if the word score is greater than the current score, score, I'm going to say that my score equals the word score, and that the funniest word is going to be equal to my current line's name, the current line's word. So this is the condition for if our word score is actually higher. What is our word score, though? This is the final part. Usage and rating are both numbers. We don't know if they're integers. We don't know if they're floats. However, every float can still be an integer, but not every integer is a float, right? Or, well, every integer is a float, not every float is an integer, sorry. So 3.7 is not an integer, but 3.0 is technically an integer whilst also being a float. that means float is technically more inclusive. So it is better if we were to take our lines and try to make them floating point numbers. So if we look at the score, we need to multiply the usage by 5. So if I do float line usage, multiply that by 5, minus, and then I'll wrap that in brackets just to be safe. So the usage gets multiplied by 5, then it gets divided by the rating that Canada gave it. So float, again, float is just safer than nothing. I just realized also usage and rating are under lowercase, right? So, and then typecast rating to a float, and it doesn't say to do any multiplication, shenanigans, or adding, or anything like that. So this is our word score. Take the usage, multiply it by 5, divide it by the rating. So we should have every part of the question. All we have left to do now is return the funniest word. And apparently, pillbanagging is the funniest word. If I Control F, pillbanagging, the usage is 46, the denominator is 1, which means that its word score is 46 times 5. And of course, the Queen thinks it is funny, so therefore, there's a very good chance that this is correct. And considering I've done this course numerous times in the past, I can say it is correct. So this is the function. If you guys have questions, hit me. It's a pretty long function, but I think it's straightforward enough to the point where you guys should generally understand what's happening.
I just want to know why you used float. Well, I can't tell which line, but like for the word score, yeah, right there.
So it's a matter of, can you guarantee that every number in here is going to be an integer? In this specific situation, yes. But if I did 60.5, instantly this would no longer be the correct score. It wouldn't fail. 60.5 would become 60. However, the score would no longer be accurate. So we can't guarantee that the data is an integer. If you look at the table that I gave, usage and rating are both just num. It doesn't say int, it doesn't say float, meaning I can't make any assumptions. And whenever you're dealing with a number type where you can't make an assumption, you have to assume float, because float is more general, it's more abstract. 6.5 is a float, but it's not an int. When it becomes an int, it becomes 6. So immediately the data is no longer accurate.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
So I did want to bring something up, and it's kind of important. You may have noticed that this loop, unlike the first question, I brought the loop outside of the with block. So this opened the file, saved it to a variable. Notice, however, when I bring the loop outside the with block in this question, it's an error now. So the question is, what changed? And the answer to that is this right here changed. CSV.dictReader creates what is called a live link, meaning that this dictionary reader is open as long as this file is open. With as a Python object automatically closes your files, meaning that the moment that this with block ended, the moment these two lines ran and we exited the block, file handler was closed. The moment file handler was closed, the dictionary reader was closed. And the moment the dictionary reader was closed, content lost its link to the dictionary reader. Remember, it was pointing, content as a variable was pointing to this as long as it existed. Just because it doesn't exist anymore doesn't mean, or the moment it stopped existing, content has nothing to point to. I should say it that way. If you guys want the item, like if you guys want to do it like this, you have to make sure that this is permanent. And in order to make sure it's permanent, we would typecast it. The moment you typecast it, you are telling Python that you no longer want to save a dictionary reader. You don't want a text IO wrapper or whatever it's called in Python. You want a tuple, meaning that it should be loaded into local memory. If I run this now, it works again. And that's because tuple has said, okay, I don't care what type you are, I'm taking your contents and I am loading you into my local memory. In this specific situation, FileHandler.readLines doesn't actually require the file to be alive, so it automatically broke. FileHandler.readLines is automatically saved as a Python list. It's saved in local memory. CSV is not saved in local memory, so I had to typecast it. If I do not want to typecast at all, I have to make sure I stay within the with block. My content needs to be alive as long as I'm using it. So this equally is valid because if I do a for line in content, content is pointing to dict reader is pointing to FH, and FH is still open because this block hasn't ended. You guys will encounter this. I guarantee you will. And you will get so frustrated trying to figure out what the problem is because Python decided that it wanted to do live links even when you save into variables. I can't defend Python's decision on this. Like most other languages don't give you a shorthand syntax like with. Python was nice to give you this, but the fact that Python gave you it leads to a lot of issues. Hence why I say, if you don't want to use with, you can use this notation. Nick is going to teach you guys this notation, but I'll go over it here. You do file handler, the variable, equals open in file, blah, blah, blah. Then you treat it as normal, and you absolutely have to do fh.close at the end. You always need to close your files. You can't just have the data open and running in the background, or else you're going to have a lot of issues. The benefit with doing it this way, though, is you control when the file closes. So you could literally open all of your files in one go at the beginning of the function and close them all at the end and guarantee 0 issues. Now that's a pretty big one. If you guys have questions, call me out. Because if not, then I'm going to go back up to Limerick and I'm going to do the bonus. All right, forever hold your peace. So, I know it's been a while since we looked at Limerick. Limerick wasn't too hard, so I'm going to assume you guys remember what Limerick was. Let's go ahead and do the bonus. So, the read the file and the write the file don't change. These guys are constant. I don't have to worry about that. It's the new content that changes. So, when I'm going through, I actually will need some sort of new string to put everything in. and I'm going to append new string afterwards. New string is going to allow me to control what goes in the new string line by line. And by default, the new string should actually be our string I plus 1 plus a tab character. Because we know that always goes in the new string. The issue is what goes after the new string. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a nested loop, a subloop, that does forward in old string dot split space. So I'm going to take the old string, whatever it was. So in the first line, it's a programming genius called Hank. I'm going to split it by spaces so I can look at the letter A by itself, the word programming by itself, the word genius by itself, the word called by itself, and the word Hank by itself. And I'm going to make a filter. What I'm going to do is if, and I need to look at the first character and last character of the string to see if they are quotes. So if word at 0 is equal to a single quote and word at -1 is equal to a single quote, then what I'm going to do is new string is going to be equal to new string plus the word pineapple. Now, one issue with doing it this way is when new string is in itself a string, the last word will always have a space. So if I were to open up result.txt, this would work perfectly fine until the last word Hank is found. Hank right now has no space. In our solution, it will have a space. I will deal with that afterwards. I just want to get the logic down. So I'll show you guys how to deal with that in a moment. In this case, the else case is just new string equals new string plus word. Like I said, if I run this version of the function and open result.txt, whoops, guess who didn't input a space? Want new string plus word plus space. Write that, write that. So now, there's the issue. The new line character went here, and then a space went. It's still the same line, but if you imagine it, remember, right after Hank, there's that character, that new line. Then we appended a space. The new line character then gets deleted and replaced with a new line, but that space didn't go away. That space still exists, and that's a problem. We can't have the last line being a space. So how do I deal with the space? Well, instead of appending a space, what I could do is I could make new string a list of words and use new string.append. By making it a list, I give myself a new function. You guys may have seen this function before. You may not have seen this function, though. What this function is I'm going to replace new string with string.join. What string.join does is it takes a list of items, and it will join them all using this string. So if I put a pipe instead of a space, and I ran this function, just so you guys can see it, the file now joins all of the words together with a pipe symbol. What I want to do is I want to join them all together with a space. If I run this now, Boom. Tab. The only issue here is there's a space here. Nick didn't want that. That's pretty easy to get rid of because I could just do this, the way we were doing it. New content.append, string at I+1 plus tab plus new string. I run this, or if I close it like an idiot, because, yeah, smart mark. If I run this, go to result.txt, these are just tabs now. There are a million ways to solve this problem. This is just one of them. You create a list, put every word in the list, join the list with spaces, append that word now with the number and the tab, bada bing, bada boom. Now we have a whole bunch of pineapples. This is a wonky case where it's a new line character. Huh. So what I can do is, this definitely is not the way you should do it, by the way. I'm just making a quick solution. Start at the second line's character and check if those are a quote in a new line. And then, oops. So you will notice this doesn't append to new line character now because it can't. So I actually have to make that a whole different if statement. Joy. Just one sec. This is why coding is not that fun sometimes. I still love coding, don't get me wrong. So if it's a new line, then take the new string. However, append a new line. Debugging, how much fun. Now it's exactly what we expect. Wrote a system to pineapple is pineapple. We just check, is the first character a quote? Are the last two characters a quote then a new line character? If so, we append pineapple with the new line character, and then we continue on like normal. Okay, that's everything on today's list, which means we're in pure question answer time. No one has any questions. Well, in that case, you guys are out 5 minutes early. Go ahead, head to class, and I'm going to end the recording.